All right, let's get started. So the first thing on the agenda, status updates. Since I'm already talking, I'll go first. I added to the agenda the Tecton Buildpacks pipeline, which is a new thing that we're going to be adding to the Tecton catalog. I could go into a little bit more detail there. As maybe a notable mention, myself and Dan are setting up a Windows workstation on Equinix Metal. I think that's how you pronounce it. And so this hopefully should enable a lot of the Windows debugging and development to be a little bit more accessible to those that either might not have a VM available or a Windows machine, physical Windows machine available. And so we're making this available to any verified contributor and maintainer of the project. So we'll have, I think for now, one, but maybe two machines always available for anybody to gain access to. A little bit more detail coming on that, but overall, that's something that we're working on. Okay, anything else? Any other status updates by anybody?
I can throw mine in. I was working on the cache image bug for Windows cache images. Most of the work's in lifecycle and image util, but it should fix the upstream pack issue. It's going to require a couple changes, and I'll keep it short, but it's going to introduce OS awareness into the constructors for image util. So be able to pass in the kind of image that you want to make from the start. So when you make a Windows image, you'll pass an option for like platform Windows, and we'll automatically add in the shim base layer and that some of that magic too. We'll be in a little bit of a weird spot, so I can talk about that a little bit more after status updates, but should hopefully have a good transition.
All right, any other status updates? Okie dokie, moving on to release planning. I think we've still got a long ways to go with pack release. The one for Tecton is coming up. I believe, I forgot, February is a short week, or sorry, short month. It will be this week, it looks like. So this is the first time that we'll be kind of doing a cadence for the Tecton integration repo. So I'm not entirely sure exactly what that looks like. I'll kind of be working ad hoc, but so far we do have updates to the 2 tasks that we have for Tecton and the new pipeline, which I'll again discuss as part of the agenda items. Okay, anything else release planning? All right, moving on to needs discussions. Okay, let's see. All right, if I recall correctly, I think we have standardized cache flag options already on the agenda. Yep. Any other items from here that we think that we should be addressing or discussing in this meeting? Cool. All right, I guess we'll hold off on these conversations till a different time. Moving on to RFCs. Again, I believe the purpose of having RFCs here is to, A, make people aware of any new upcoming changes to platforms, and B, to see if we want to dive into any of these specific changes, if anybody has questions about them. So the first one we have is adding builder key and project descriptor, right? I think this is from the title, pretty self-explanatory. We're adding just a builder key. I believe here's the sample. Yeah, so there's a builder with a string. This would be the same thing that we would provide via pack, but now it's in a way that it's specified at the project level and maintained in the source repository so that it's portable. The other one, group additions to the build order. I believe that the description of the title isn't all too clear, but I believe this is a pre and post build packs. Yeah. So this is pre-pending or appending build packs to a certain order via pack CLI arguments and the project toml. Next one, Stockify Repo. I'm not entirely sure how this applies to platforms specifically, other than I know that there's some intention that Pack will provide this functionality. I'm not sure. Yeah, here. So packs that create, you'd be able to kind of pass in the image that you want. The run image is a couple of flags that are detailed here, and it should add metadata, mix-ins, and so forth, information to the image. So basically taking any base image and creating a stack from it. Okay. And last but not least, application mix-ins. That's actually a draft, so we'll skip over that one. I think that one's still ways away. All right, back to our agenda. Standardizing cache flags. Anybody want to take that on?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is probably something that's come up a couple times, is that we keep getting requests for different options for people to manage the build cache when they're running a pack build, whether that's making a remote image that they could then save between runs, or specifying where the cache is coming specifically and the image that it's going to locally. I think what we have right now is just like a bunch of flags that specify each thing individually. And so there's like a lot of combinations here. And so it feels like we should come up with a unified way to express all these ideas. There is like some small changes that'll be needed to, I think, let the creator have some of this functionality, specifically when you have differences between whether you want to import a image, like a cache image, and export a local volume, or vice versa. But that's just kind of like something that would be possible already with just running the binaries independently. Just don't really have it on the creator yet. So
Do you want to share your screen? Because I think
oh yeah, recording.
the issue has a really good proposed solution, or at least it definitely solidifies it in my mind.
Yeah, can y'all see this?
Yep. So I guess at first, right, like when this was first brought up, it was like we have cache image and cache volume. And that was like the idea that this is where your stuff's going to be persisted. And it's either going to be in one of these two formats, right? And reading through the proposed solution, as well as I think some of the comments below, it seems like we're talking about, like, I think migrating caches is the right term to use here, right? It's like being able to pull cache from somewhere, but then persist them elsewhere. Is that more or less the intent of this proposal?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that like the fact that we can't do that is just a constraint kind of imposed by pack, and not really imposed by the underlying lifecycle binaries. So it feels like something that shouldn't be too difficult to do, right? And if it's already possible with the underlying lifecycle binaries, should probably do it. We'll make this simpler.
I guess what kind of like user demand is there for this feature? Because I definitely feel like like looking at, I guess, the proposed solution, right? Maybe there could be a different approach, but looking at that, it definitely adds complexity, right? I'm thinking of like the Docker, um, it's not volumes, mounts, right? Like the Docker mount syntax, and that's like pretty complex. So, so yeah, I guess basically I'm kind of like asking, is the demand worth the added complexity?
Uh, Good question. That's like super hard to answer, I guess, right? How do I weigh those two things? I guess we have like, so I think we're going to, whoops, like a couple of these things, we're going to be like implementing this, something very similar to this, right? Like, I think this person wants this to be configurable. So
Yeah, so
I
they're
guess,
trying to store the cache as a volume, right? Or sorry, they're trying to be able to name the cached volumes so that they could potentially share them across to different apps. At least that's one of the use cases that I've definitely heard before, right?
yeah.
To me, like again, these individual issues, none of them have I heard that they want to migrate cache, right? And in the case of basically specifying two different inputs, or an input and an output, I guess is a better way of saying it.
Um,
Or am I mistaken in that?
right. No, I guess, I mean, we could do this as just specifying the cache, right? One input, one output. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like we could cut this down, but it, again, seems like this is just something like a constraint that pack imposes, not really imposed by any of the underlying processes. So,
Well, I think, doesn't the creator, you probably mentioned this already, but doesn't the creator not have this capability? Right? Like it would
yeah,
also need some additional buy-in to be able to provide the same functionality to the creator.
yeah, it would.
Yeah, and given that in most cases, at least, this is maybe just me making an assumption, but most people would use the suggested builders and thereby use trusted builders, which thereby would use the creator. And like, if we really think that this again was like a demand, or there was a demand for this, then we'd want to also add it to the creator. And so I'm thinking about like the domino effect, right, of all the effort versus the demand. And like I said, like I haven't heard this. I don't know if you could point to any specific request to have a migrating cache versus just, is that really the reason why we're doing it, or is it that we're just trying to collapse the idea of having, cache image versus cache volume flags?
Yeah, I think at the start, the reason why I wrote this was definitely simplify the user experience when using all these options, like, and the interactions between them, right? Like, you can't publish and specify the name of a volume that you're going to use, right? Like, there's just like there's going to be a lot of interaction between these things, right?
Terrence, I think I saw your mic, you know, unmute. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just curious. What's the migrating use case? Maybe I missed that part of the discussion. So you want to have an input cache, but then you want to write to a different cache on output.
Yeah. And so it'd be a difference in type. So you'd be able to read from a cache image and write to a cache volume, or switch those two. I mean, that's one of the things this would let you do.
I guess I'm having trouble understanding like how that's really usable other than a very specific edge case. But like if you're taking the cache from a volume and then storing it in an image afterwards, then like assuming that this is in a pipeline somewhere, right? Like you'd have to change the options on the next run to then be looking at the cache image. Otherwise, you're working off of stale cache if you're just continue to reuse the volume cache. So ultimately, like hypothetically, right? Like if someone was really saying like, hey, I want to be able to migrate cache, right? Like, would we instead then have like a pack cache migrate command, right? That then takes an input and an output versus having to do the build process for it.
Is it a migrate or a copy? Like if I specify this source, is it then copied to this destination and then the build gets run on top of it? Or I guess it's just provided in and then when you do any writes, it gets written to the output.
Sorry, so was that a proposal, or was this like following up on Javier's proposal of having a specific command to do this, or when you run pack, this would be the behavior? Sorry, I missed that.
I interpret it as a specific command to do it, like separate. But
Yeah, I have no idea what this would look like in a separate command. Like the translation of a volume to an image. I think that we kind of just rely on the life cycle to take care of a lot of this right now. So
Yeah. Although on a technical side of things, right, it's the exact same layout. It's just whether it's in a file system in a volume or in a tar format, but in the same structure, right? In layers. Or is it one layer? I guess I don't even know that. No, it's multiple layers. No. It's interesting. So again, I guess maybe I want to determine the demand for the migrating use case. But if we were to think of simplifying the fact that we have two flags and potentially making them one flag, I think that sounds more reasonable. Or I guess maybe more actionable, right? Because then the scope is a lot lower, I would think, right? And then it doesn't require for us to hopefully have to like also change the creator, right? Or maybe the change there would be also minimal. I don't know if you think that, or if you agree with that, Dan, or if there's something that I'm missing in this.
I think that sounds reasonable. Willing to cut down the scope on this.
so would that just be cutting out the destination stuff in your proposal?
Yeah, I think this would.
Yeah, because I could definitely think of flags that we've condensed, right? Like I'm thinking of pull policy. We definitely condensed that. And we definitely allowed for some room where we could add complex pulling logic, which we haven't implemented again because the desire hasn't been quite there yet, right? But I feel like maybe we could do something similar here where we could simplify it to a single flag, right? And then determine exactly like what the format for that should be, and make sure that it doesn't lock us into anything if we want to think about more complex, maybe migrating logic and stuff like that. So I don't know if you were here during that RFC, but it's definitely an RFC I could point you to where we did that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that could help here as well.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Does that satisfy the topic for now? Cool. Alrighty. Moving on. All right. I guess I'll present the other one. Well, we have 5 minutes. Yeah, we're definitely not going to get through all of these.
Mine can definitely wait for next.
What about package refactoring?
It's pretty small. I think just take a look at it. You don't have to
Okay.
go over it right now.
Sounds good. I'll go through the Tecton thing real quick, and if we have maybe a few minutes, we could also glance at that one. All right, so this is a pull request on the Tecton integration repo. So I realized that this is like a relatively new repo as far as being worked on. The purpose of this repo is to provide a lot of tooling and automation and testing around some of our tasks. And one of the things that kind of came up in one of our discussions was the fact that we have 2 tasks, and it's very difficult for the user to really understand which task they should be using, right? Like they want to, do they use this Buildpacks task? And we kind of explain what it really is here, right, to some extent. Or do they use this like, well, I guess that link doesn't work. Or do they use the Buildpack phases, right? And again, it kind of tries to explain a little bit as to why you might want to use this. But in general, like it's still not very user friendly, right? At least compared to Pack, where it's an underlying implementation detail, whether it uses individual phases or if it uses the creator. So in trying to replicate that, one of the limitations with Tecton right now is that in these tasks, there are steps, but these steps cannot be conditional, right? So like there's no way to conditionally execute these steps. The conditions lie at a higher level, which is what's called a pipeline, right? So you could conditionally execute certain tasks within this pipeline. So if I look at, where's the actual, here it is. So if I look at the actual tasks for the pipeline itself, right, whether this trust builder, right, it translates very easily to the pack trust builder flag. It determines whether one of 2 tasks will run or set of tasks, which is the build untrusted, right? We have this condition here, or the build trusted, which I guess I skipped over here. Build trusted, which then executes the Buildpacks task versus the Buildpack phases, right? So very simple, I guess, indirection for this pipeline. But other things that I think this pipeline will allow us to do is add more functionality that has been requested in regards to like environment variables. One of the things I want to do is like determine the user ID and group ID by inspecting the image, as opposed to requiring the user to be able to set this. So I think long term, what I want is the pipeline to be like the simplest use case, and then the tasks to be kind of like implementation details. That's more or less the strategy or goal here. Any questions on this? Cool. So the only other thing I will ask is if anybody has some free time to review this PR, make sure I'm not missing, anything big or whatnot. But otherwise, again, the intent is to release it this week. All right. Thank you. Oh, and we ended right at time. So we have, I guess, two other things. As mentioned, package refactoring. If you mind looking at that RFC, I think that'd be nice. But other than that, we could review it at more depth next time around. Cool. Thank you all. See you later.